Hi everyone, it's me, Arielle, and it's Wednesday Warriors, and this week I'm going to be talking about body checking as a behavior that's part of different eating disorders. And probably a lot of people understand what body checking is, even if they don't have an eating disorder. Body checking is when you look in the mirror, you measure your body parts either up against what they continue to be or you wish they were, or compare them to other people's bodies. Um, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how that can make a person feel, why it's not helpful in recovery from an eating disorder. Um, Talk about a little bit why some people avoid looking at themselves, why that can be a bad thing, and just really try to stress that the fear of something is worse than the reality. And I think a lot of the time people with eating disorders have a very skewed perception of self, and that really keeps them from getting farther along in recovery because they're just so scared of either gaining weight or being unattractive in some way, or not being up to par to their standards that they've set for themselves. And it can be a really tricky thing because sometimes really what people see, especially with anorexia nervosa, is something completely different than what everyone else sees. And the mirror can be a very scary thing. I used to be a compulsive body checker when I was in college, especially the early years of my university experience, like my freshman and sophomore year of college. I was definitely preoccupied with checking my body, measuring certain parts of my body, thinking that I was too fat, or at least that certain parts of my body had too much fat on them. And it couldn't have been farther from the truth. I mean, looking back, I can see that I was far too thin, but I just didn't see that at the time, and my perception was completely off. And it took me a while to realize my perception was completely off, and then to just understand that I couldn't be the judge of myself for that point in time because I was just too sick, or my mind just didn't want to see what was actually there. Some of the body checking was sort of a perfectionist thing. I used to think that I could be more tan, or my hair could be shinier, or my eyelashes should be longer, or all sorts of really nitpicky things like that, where I would just sort of ascertain that any number of things could be better than they were. And it would just be a way for me to get down on myself and to think that I wasn't good enough. And it had nothing really to do with other people, it had to do with a very strong level of self-hate. And I think in growing to love myself, I was able to get rid of all that and push it to the side and see what was really there when I looked in the mirror. And at least for a certain period of time, trust other people to say, you really are too thin. What you're seeing is not correct. Or you really are pretty. What you're seeing is not correct. It seems pretty obvious, but why body checking is not helpful in recovery from an eating disorder is because you're constantly comparing yourself either to crazy ideals that aren't reality, or comparing yourself to other people when you're simply beautiful and fantastic in your own right but haven't realized it, or you are just too preoccupied and obsessed with something that doesn't need to be happening so regularly. If you constantly check out parts of your body when you pass a mirror, or you're constantly um, spending too much time in front of one, like for example in the morning, if you really only need 10 or 15 minutes to look in that mirror and you end up being there for an hour or two because you just can't stand the way you look, or you can't stand what you're wearing, or you change your mind, a lot of times you're putting a lot of energy and effort into something where there does not need to be a lot of energy and effort. Some of the time, it's just a matter of realizing, hey, I don't need to be doing this, and I think I can make myself stop. And just sort of being self-aware and understanding that it doesn't need to be happening is enough to kind of push you and nudge you a little bit more in the right direction. Sometimes it's a really hard habit to break, and I would be willing to guess that a number of people out there don't even realize how much body checking they do. I would challenge you to think about it for a minute. see if you can pinpoint how many times you've looked in a mirror today, or how many minutes you probably have spent in front of a mirror today, criticizing your body or body checking. It's a strange thing, because what I want to tell you is to limit your time in front of the mirror, but really being in front of the mirror can be a good thing and should be a good thing, and I would hope that everyone eventually can embrace that and stand in front of the mirror and love what they see there and have it not really be a big deal. I think the big deal is the preoccupation and the obsessive nature, and obviously the criticism. So there are people who avoid the mirror at all costs due to their eating disorder as a sort of behavior. It's usually because they're so afraid that what they're going to see is going to be so much worse than it really is. And it's that whole dread, that anticipation, that fear being so much worse than the reality. Getting rid of the mirror completely is also not really a good thing, because if you think about it, mirrors are everywhere. If you pass a store window, it can be a mirror. If you're sitting in your car, there are mirrors. There are going to be times when you will catch a glimpse of yourself, and to have that be the only glimpse that you see can put you off guard and can really make something unpleasant that doesn't need to be. And what I always say about triggers, if a mirror is a trigger for you, the world is a triggering place, and the sooner you learn to deal with those things that are triggering and be able to live your life normally, or as normally as possible, the better off you're going to be. You can't just avoid everything that is a trigger, because that's just no way to live. So you have to kind of figure out which kind of a person you are, if you're either one of these. If you are the kind of person that constantly finds yourself in front of the mirror body checking and being criticizing towards yourself, or if you're the kind of person who avoids those mirrors at all costs because you're just so very much afraid. And if you are the kind of person who's constantly body checking, you need to challenge yourself to limit your time in front of that mirror, or to go without a mirror for one day each week and kind of build up your time that way without it. If you're the kind of person that avoids the mirror at all costs, you need to slowly reintroduce the mirror to your life and face that fear and understand that your perception may be skewed and that reality is definitely less scary than what you have in your head. One thing I really want to stress is that bodies don't change overnight. So much of the time I hear people tell me that they ate this or that, or they did this or that, and now they're sure they gained 10 pounds overnight, or they gained 5 pounds overnight, or their stomach is sticking out 2 inches farther, or they're going to look awful because of whatever it is they did or didn't do. And it's just not true. It doesn't happen that way. You might feel that way, and I think that being uncomfortable in your own skin is a very true feeling. It's completely valid. A lot of people feel that way, and you can feel uncomfortable in certain clothing, and you can feel uncomfortable with yourself, and you can feel not good. But your image, your body, cannot change overnight as drastically as your mind would lead you to believe that it can. And as soon as you face that and accept that and realize that with the logical part of your mind that it just can't happen, you will be that much stronger. So if you still sort of have that nagging, unrealistic fear that you gained 5 or 10 pounds overnight, or that your stomach is sticking out farther, or whatever your insecurity might be, you may still have that fear, but you can combat it with that logical part of your brain that's saying, it's just not possible. But just in the same way that people have to learn to stop restricting, or stop counting calories, or stop binging, or stop purging, or stop running to poor coping mechanisms, people have to learn how to stop body checking, or how to stop avoiding a mirror. And it can be hard, but you have to think of it as a behavior. You really have to think of it as just another one of those eating disorder behaviors that you want to break. And you can. It's very possible to break a habit. It does take a while sometimes, and especially with something that has become as natural as going in front of a mirror. It's one thing to go in front of a mirror and look at yourself and say this or that in your head and then go on with your day. But if you become obsessed, if you stand there and you really can't pull yourself away because you're checking blemishes on your face for a really long amount of time, or you're measuring your arms, or you're measuring your stomach, or you're measuring your thigh, or whatever it might be, it's just unhealthy, and that's not the way things are supposed to be. That's not what a mirror is for. A mirror is to behold beauty. It's not to show you flaws, and it's not to give you permission to nitpick all of your flaws. We all have flaws. No one is perfect. The mirror can be your friend. It doesn't have to be your enemy. So I'm just going to take a moment right now to be your mirror and let you know that you're beautiful, you're fantastic, you are the only you. You are an artistic vision. You are unique. You are perfect in your own way, because nothing out there is perfect, and imperfections have their own perfection about them. I'm going to put a bunch of other videos in the info box for this video because I've talked a lot about body image before. I've talked a lot about learning to love yourself. I've talked a lot about mirrors and positive affirmations and things that you can surround yourself with to help yourself with this sort of a problem or a trigger. And I've also done numerous videos on triggers and how to deal with those. So I will post those links. Hopefully you'll check those out if you haven't seen them already. And I hope you guys are having a wonderful week out there. I will see you next time.